The evening was warm, and the air buzzed with the kind of excitement that only comes from an event where money and power gather in one place. The mansion stood at the end of a long, winding driveway, its lights glimmering like a beacon in the night. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast soft reflections on the polished floors, and laughter echoed from room to room. The party was grand, filled with people who wore expensive suits and sparkling dresses, carrying glasses of champagne as if it were water. Among them, moving quietly yet with purpose, was a young waitress. She had been working for months in the catering company, doing her best to stay unnoticed while earning her living. Tonight was another busy night, another event to serve and move on, but this one felt different. There was something in the air that hinted at drama, something unspoken, a tension that even the waitstaff could feel. The waitress had grown used to being in the background, a part of the scenery that many overlooked. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied neatly, and her shoes comfortable for long hours on her feet. But what set her apart, though she would never advertise it, was her deep love for music. The piano had been her escape since childhood, a place where she could express herself when the world seemed too loud or too harsh. Yet she had never played in front of strangers who judged her, never in a room filled with people who measured everything by wealth and status. Tonight, she carried trays of appetizers and glasses of champagne, weaving through clusters of guests laughing too loudly and speaking with the kind of confidence that comes from privilege. She offered polite smiles, nodded when people spoke to her, and kept moving, careful not to attract attention. She had learned that, in these spaces, invisibility was safety. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and the rich could be cruel in ways that left marks long after the night ended. The millionaire hosting the party was a man known for his sharp suits and sharper ego. Stories of his wealth and his ability to control a room preceded him wherever he went. He had a reputation for showing power, for enjoying the discomfort of others, and tonight was no exception. From the moment he entered the grand hall, he commanded attention. Every laugh, every nod, every glance seemed to orbit around him. He noticed everything, including the quiet young waitress who moved with care among the guests. He watched her with an interest that made her pause briefly as she balanced a tray of sparkling drinks. Something about her caught his eye, not because she stood out in the crowd, but because she seemed to be intentionally small, intentionally quiet, as if she didn't belong yet she still existed. He leaned toward one of his friends, a glass of champagne in hand, and made a remark that went unnoticed by everyone but himself. There was a hint of challenge in his eyes, a plan forming that was meant to amuse him, though its target had no idea yet what was coming. As the evening progressed, the music played softly from hidden speakers, and the chatter in the rooms ebbed and flowed like gentle waves. The waitress continued her work, occasionally glancing at the grand piano placed prominently in one corner of the main hall. It was an exquisite instrument, polished to a shine, and it seemed almost to glow under the chandelier lights. Her fingers twitched involuntarily when she saw it, memories of her childhood lessons, hours spent practicing scales and melodies, filling her mind. She had always loved that feeling, the connection between thought and music, but she pushed it aside. This was not her world. Tonight, her role was to serve. The millionaire's eyes returned to her, more focused now. He walked across the room with the kind of presence that made the air seem heavier, each step calculated. Guests parted slightly as he moved, some out of respect, some out of caution, and others simply to avoid getting too close to someone who thrived on attention. When he reached her, he smiled, but it was a smile that carried a quiet kind of menace, a thrill taken from the anticipation of an unexpected spectacle. "Do you play the piano?" he asked casually, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer or intended to find it out in front of others. The waitress blinked, surprised. She had not expected anyone to ask, least of all him. Her heart skipped a beat, and she hesitated, unsure whether to answer truthfully or deflect politely. There was a crowd nearby, a few of the more curious guests noticing the exchange, their interest piqued by the millionaire's sudden focus on someone so ordinary in appearance. I do," she replied softly, keeping her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. She was careful not to reveal too much, aware that her admission had already sparked the curiosity of the surrounding people. She had told very few that she could play. Music was her private world, a place untouched by judgment. Yet now, her secret was on the verge of being exposed in the most public way possible. "Good," he said, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Then you will play for us tonight." The words hung in the air, and a few of the guests exchanged amused looks, assuming it would be a brief, perhaps awkward performance meant to entertain in a light-hearted way. The waitress's stomach dropped. She hadn't come here to perform. She had come to serve, to remain in the background, to earn her living quietly. The idea of playing in front of a room full of strangers, some of whom were judging her silently already, filled her with a mix of dread and apprehension. The millionaire clapped his hands lightly, attracting the attention of several nearby guests. "Come on, everyone," he said, his voice carrying easily over the ambient noise. "Let's see what our talented friend here can do." A small circle formed around the piano, guests leaning slightly forward, their expressions a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and the kind of expectation reserved for something entertaining but possibly embarrassing. The waitress's heart pounded in her chest. She took a step back, her fingers brushing against the edge of the tray she had been carrying, grounding herself for a moment before she moved toward the instrument. Her mind raced with thoughts of how to escape gracefully, how to turn down the request without offending someone with the power to make her night unforgettable in the worst possible way. But every option seemed impossible. The millionaire's gaze followed her, unyielding, and the guests waited, their attention now fully on her. There was no room for refusal. This was no longer about serving drinks or passing hors d'oeuvres. It was a test of poise, courage, and perhaps talent that she hadn't revealed to anyone before. As she approached the piano, she noticed the intricate details of the instrument. The smooth keys, the glossy finish, the way the light reflected across the polished surface. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Music had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could channel her emotions and find clarity. Now, it would either be her salvation or the stage for public humiliation. The millionaire stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward the piano as if he had orchestrated the scene for maximum effect. Guests murmured, some recording on their phones, some whispering guesses about what might happen. The waitress seated herself on the bench, her hands hovering over the keys, feeling the cool touch of possibility and anxiety. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on every lesson learned, every melody practiced in secret, every hour spent alone at a piano when the world felt overwhelming. In that brief pause, the room seemed to hold its breath. The chatter faded, the laughter softened, and even the millionaire's confident smirk seemed momentarily uncertain. The stage was set, the audience waiting, and the young woman who had been quietly serving drinks minutes ago was now at the center of attention. She could feel every eye on her, every expectation, every silent judgment. But beneath the fear was a spark of determination. This was her moment, unexpected as it was, and she had a choice, to falter or to rise. Her fingers found the keys, light at first, tentative, then more assured as she allowed herself to immerse in the music. The first notes drifted softly through the room, drawing attention and shifting the energy in the space. The millionaire, who had intended to control the situation, leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. Guests stopped whispering, some holding their breath, sensing something different. The music was not what anyone had anticipated. It was not awkward, it was not clumsy. It was precise, delicate, and expressive. And in that moment, the young waitress began to realize that perhaps this unexpected twist of fate was not meant to humiliate her after all. It was the start of something that would change the course of the evening, and perhaps much more. She had been forced into the spotlight, yes, but she was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller through her music, and the room was about to witness something extraordinary. The tension that had gripped her heart began to mingle with excitement, and she allowed herself to play, fully, fear mingling with courage, nerves giving way to skill. The night, which had begun as ordinary work, was about to become unforgettable. The room was alive with expectation. Guests leaned in slightly, some with raised eyebrows, others with amused smirks, assuming this would be nothing more than a brief, perhaps awkward interlude. The waitress sat at the grand piano, her back straight, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She could feel every gaze on her, every whisper that circulated like a low hum across the crowd. The millionaire watched with a smug expression, convinced that any misstep would amuse him greatly. He had orchestrated this moment, believing it would highlight his control and the contrast between wealth and those who served it. At first, she hesitated, as if weighing the consequences of playing or remaining silent. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and anticipation. Every eye was on her, but she reminded herself that music had always been her refuge. It did not judge, it did not mock. Slowly, she began to play, letting her fingers move carefully, producing soft, tentative notes that echoed across the hall. They were delicate, almost hesitant, but full of promise. A hush fell over the guests, their previous chatter fading into nothing as they listened more closely. The millionaire's smirk began to falter. He had expected some amateurish attempt, a performance that would leave her red-faced and embarrassed. Instead, the music spoke of skill and practice, of countless hours spent learning and perfecting. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. The guests, initially entertained by the prospect of her humiliation, were now leaning forward in genuine interest, captivated by the unexpected beauty of the sound. The waitress felt the tension slowly shift around her. The initial fear did not disappear, but it transformed into focus. Her mind cleared, and the notes flowed more freely, each chord a story she had kept within herself for years. She was no longer just the quiet young woman who served drinks. She had become the storyteller through the piano, commanding attention without saying a word. Every keystroke carried emotion, hope, determination, and the quiet strength of someone who had often been overlooked but never underestimated her own abilities. Guests exchanged glances, surprised by the depth of her talent. Some whispered to one another, trying to identify who she was, how she had learned to play with such elegance and confidence. The air was thick with admiration, curiosity, and the subtle embarrassment of those who had expected a spectacle of failure rather than skill. The millionaire shifted in his seat, clearly unsettled. His plan to assert dominance through humiliation was crumbling, and the realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. She continued, letting the music swell and fall with natural rhythm, moving through pieces that reflected both her technical skill and emotional depth. The room transformed. The grandeur of the mansion, the glittering guests, the chandeliers, all became part of the atmosphere that her music shaped. She could feel the change. The whispers of doubt turned into murmurs of awe. Even the staff paused for a moment, holding trays a little longer than necessary, caught up in the unexpected performance. As she played, the waitress noticed small changes in her own perception. The fear that had gripped her initially had not vanished, but it had evolved. It was now a mixture of excitement and confidence, a recognition that her abilities could shine even in a place where she had expected only judgment. Each note was a declaration, subtle but powerful, that her talent was hers alone to share, regardless of the intentions of those who sought to diminish her. The millionaire's presence was no longer entirely dominant. He had intended to orchestrate an embarrassing moment, but instead, he watched helplessly as the room's attention shifted entirely to her. His audience no longer laughed at her but listened, captivated. Guests murmured their praise quietly, careful not to challenge his pride, but unable to hide their genuine admiration. The young woman at the piano had taken control in a way that no one had expected, her music speaking louder than any word could. The waitress allowed herself to relax into the music. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes gentle, sometimes assertive, each movement deliberate and filled with purpose. She remembered all the times she had practiced in secret, the hours spent with no audience, the moments of doubt and perseverance. That dedication bore fruit now, in the most unexpected setting imaginable. The music resonated not just in the room but within herself, affirming her own worth and ability. Guests began to recognize the emotion behind her playing. It was more than technical skill. It carried a story of persistence, humility, and quiet strength. People shifted in their seats, leaning closer, some closing their eyes to focus on the sound. The room, once filled with superficial chatter, had transformed into a space of genuine appreciation and respect. The performance had become an event that no one could ignore or dismiss. The millionaire's initial amusement had transformed into a subtle unease. He had underestimated her, assuming that a young waitress could be easily flustered in front of a wealthy, elite audience. He realized now that his plan had backfired, and he could not mask his astonishment. The room, previously a stage for his dominance, had become a testament to someone else's talent and resilience. His control had been challenged by the power of skill and authenticity. As the music continued, the waitress felt the room's energy shift further. Where she had expected tension and embarrassment, there was admiration and intrigue. The guests who had arrived expecting a light entertainment for their amusement were now witnesses to a display of genuine artistry. Phones discreetly recorded snippets, but more importantly, eyes were fixed on her, appreciating the authenticity of the performance. Even those who had initially assumed her performance would be a spectacle of failure found themselves moved. Conversations paused, whispers ceased, and attention focused entirely on the melody that filled the space. The waitress's presence at the piano commanded a quiet power, a contrast to the flamboyance around her. She was not seeking approval, yet she earned it effortlessly through dedication and talent. The music ebbed and flowed, sometimes soft and introspective, sometimes bold and commanding. Each piece revealed another layer of her personality, another depth of her talent. The room, filled with wealth and status, had been transformed into a space of humility and genuine connection through the unexpected brilliance of one person's skill. The millionaire, for all his attempts at control, could only observe, realizing that the power of art could not be dominated or diminished by wealth alone. When she finished the first set of pieces, there was a brief silence. The room collectively held its breath, unsure how to respond, waiting for permission to release the tension. Then, gradually, the applause began, tentative at first, then growing louder, more genuine, until it filled the hall with appreciation. Guests stood, some clapping enthusiastically, others nodding in admiration. The waitress smiled quietly, a mixture of relief and pride washing over her. She had faced the challenge, met it with grace, and the result was far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The millionaire attempted to regain composure, offering polite claps, but the room had already shifted. The attention was no longer on him or his wealth. It was on the young woman who had dared to play with honesty and talent. His plan to entertain at the expense of another had transformed into an unforeseen celebration of skill. The evening, which had begun as an assertion of power, now belonged to her, momentarily rewriting the hierarchy of the room. For the waitress, this moment was more than a performance. It was a revelation, a confirmation that her passion and dedication could transcend circumstance. The fear that had initially gripped her had been replaced by a quiet triumph. Each note had been a declaration of her identity, a reminder that even in a world that often overlooked people like her, she had a voice, and it could be heard. As she rose from the piano for a brief pause, she noticed subtle changes in the expressions around her. Guests who had doubted her ability now approached with smiles and words of genuine admiration. Some asked how long she had been playing, others inquired about her training, clearly intrigued and inspired. The atmosphere had shifted completely, and she realized that this unexpected encounter had opened doors not through wealth or influence, but through authenticity and skill. The millionaire, though trying to maintain his composure, seemed unsettled. His audience had shifted, and he could not easily reclaim the dominance he had anticipated. The room, captivated by her music, now saw him as a spectator, watching as someone else claimed the spotlight. For the first time that evening, his control had limits, and the realization left a subtle but unmistakable impression on him. The waitress, now more confident, prepared to continue playing. Her hands hovered over the keys once more, ready to explore further melodies and share more of her story through music. She felt a growing sense of empowerment, a recognition that talent and courage could transform a moment of potential humiliation into an unforgettable triumph. The room waited, eager to hear more, and she was ready to give them exactly that. In the process, she was discovering that even in the most intimidating circumstances, one could rise above expectation, not through defiance, but through the quiet strength of doing what one loved and doing it well. The music filled the room, flowing effortlessly from the grand piano as the waitress became more comfortable with each note. The initial nerves that had weighed heavily on her moments ago were gradually replaced by a quiet focus and a sense of purpose. She let herself feel the music fully, allowing every emotion, every memory of practice and persistence, to guide her fingers across the keys. The room had become silent, the usual murmurs and laughter replaced by rapt attention. Guests, who had initially expected a brief and awkward performance, now watched with genuine admiration, some leaning forward as if trying to catch every sound more clearly. The millionaire, who had expected to command the evening with his wealth and control, now found himself taken aback. His plan to embarrass the waitress had not only failed but had backfired spectacularly. He had anticipated discomfort and awkwardness, yet the music flowing from her hands was skilled, confident, and full of emotion. He could feel the eyes of his peers on him, waiting to see how he would react, and he realized that this young woman had captured the room's attention far more than he ever could. As she played, the waitress began to explore more complex melodies. Her hands moved with precision and confidence, each chord resonating throughout the grand hall. She felt a sense of freedom, as if the piano were an extension of herself, translating her thoughts and emotions into sound. It was no longer about being forced to perform. It was about expressing something that had always been a part of her, something that could not be contained by fear or circumstance. Guests were captivated. They whispered to one another, unsure of how to describe what they were witnessing. The music was not just technically impressive. It carried emotion, depth, and a story that seemed to transcend the luxurious surroundings. People who had expected a fleeting moment of entertainment were now fully engaged, their attention focused entirely on her performance. Even those who had been indifferent or dismissive moments ago found themselves drawn in, listening closely to the melodies that filled the room. The waitress noticed the change in the atmosphere. The tension that had initially surrounded her was now replaced by admiration and respect. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had taken control of a situation that had been designed to make her uncomfortable. Each note she played was a statement, a subtle declaration that her abilities were real, that her dedication and passion could shine even under the most intimidating circumstances. The millionaire shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had expected to be the center of attention, the one who dictated the room's energy, yet he now found himself overshadowed by someone he had intended to belittle. He glanced around, observing the expressions of the guests, seeing their genuine interest and appreciation for her performance. For the first time that evening, he realized that his power had limits, that wealth and status could not dictate talent or command admiration. The waitress continued, her fingers moving effortlessly across the keys, exploring variations in tempo and dynamics that added depth and emotion to her performance. She was no longer playing simply to fulfill a demand. She was telling a story through her music, drawing the audience into her world. Each chord was deliberate, each melody carefully shaped to convey feeling. The room was transformed, the elegant chandeliers and polished floors now serving as a backdrop to her artistry. Guests were visibly impressed. Some recorded snippets on their phones. Others simply closed their eyes to immerse themselves fully in the experience. Conversations paused, laughter faded, and even the waitstaff found themselves momentarily captivated, forgetting their duties as they listened. The performance had become a shared experience, uniting the room in a moment of genuine admiration and awe. The millionaire's discomfort grew. He had underestimated her, assuming that a young waitress could be easily flustered and humiliated. Now, he watched helplessly as the crowd's attention shifted entirely to her. His carefully planned moment of dominance had dissolved, replaced by a display of talent and resilience that he could neither control nor replicate. The room was no longer about wealth and power. It was about skill, courage, and authenticity. The waitress felt a surge of confidence. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a conversation, a bridge connecting her to the audience. She allowed herself to play more freely, exploring the piano's full range and expressing her emotions without restraint. The melodies became richer, more complex, and more engaging, each note drawing the listeners deeper into the story she was telling through sound. The atmosphere shifted further as the audience began to respond with genuine enthusiasm. Applause broke out after particularly moving passages, and the room seemed to vibrate with collective appreciation. Guests who had initially doubted her abilities now offered compliments, smiles, and nods of approval. The young woman who had arrived as a waitress was now recognized as a musician, commanding respect through her talent and presence. The millionaire attempted to regain control, offering polite claps and gestures of acknowledgement, but the room's energy was no longer in his hands. He realized that his intended spectacle of embarrassment had become a showcase of her skill, a moment that elevated her rather than diminished her. The contrast between his expectation and reality was stark, and he could not easily reclaim the attention that she had earned. As she continued to play, the waitress felt a sense of liberation. The fear that had gripped her at the beginning of the evening had transformed into determination and empowerment. Each note was a reaffirmation of her abilities, a reminder that her passion and dedication had value beyond her current circumstances. She had faced a challenge imposed by someone else, yet she had turned it into an opportunity to shine. Guests were fully engaged, some leaning forward in their seats, others closing their eyes to focus entirely on the music. The performance had transcended expectation, becoming more than just a display of skill. It was an emotional journey that resonated with everyone present. People who had come for superficial entertainment were now experiencing something meaningful, something that spoke to the human spirit rather than material wealth. The waitress's confidence grew with each passing moment. She allowed herself to experiment with dynamics, tempo, and phrasing, creating variations that added depth and texture to her performance. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, guided by intuition and experience. She was no longer playing to appease or perform on demand. She was expressing herself fully, sharing a part of herself that had always been hidden. The audience responded instinctively, reacting to the music's ebb and flow. Applause and cheers punctuated particularly moving passages, and guests exchanged impressed glances. The room, once filled with chatter and casual observation, had been transformed into a space of collective admiration. The young waitress had captured the hearts and attention of everyone present, demonstrating that talent and authenticity could command respect in a way that wealth and status could not. The millionaire's expression remained guarded, but the subtle shift in the room did not escape him. He had expected control, dominance, and the satisfaction of orchestrating someone else's discomfort. Instead, he found himself witnessing the exact opposite, a celebration of skill, courage, and authenticity that he could neither diminish nor redirect. The reality of the situation was undeniable, and he could only observe as the crowd's focus remained firmly on her. The waitress allowed herself a brief moment of reflection as she continued to play. She thought of the countless hours she had spent practicing in secret, the moments of doubt, the perseverance that had brought her here. Each note she played was a testament to her dedication and passion, and the audience's response reinforced her belief in herself. She had turned a situation designed to embarrass her into an opportunity to shine, and the experience was transformative. As the final notes of her set resonated through the hall, a hush fell over the audience. There was a moment of silence, a collective breath held in appreciation and awe. Then, gradually, applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic. Guests rose to their feet, some clapping, others cheering, all acknowledging the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. The room had been transformed by her music, and the impact was undeniable. The waitress rose from the piano, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced a challenge, overcome fear, and shared her talent with an audience that had initially been skeptical. The room's energy had shifted completely, and she now stood as the center of attention, not through wealth or status, but through skill, courage, and authenticity. The experience had changed the dynamic of the evening, and she had emerged not just unscathed, but celebrated. The millionaire attempted to offer polite applause, but the focus had shifted irreversibly. The young woman who had been a quiet waitress moments ago had captured the room's admiration, demonstrating that talent and determination could command respect in any setting. The audience's attention remained on her, and the impact of her performance was evident in every expression, every whispered comment, every look of genuine appreciation. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt a sense of empowerment and accomplishment that went beyond the immediate recognition. The experience had shown her the value of courage, the power of authenticity, and the importance of embracing one's abilities, even in unexpected and intimidating circumstances. She had turned a moment designed for humiliation into a triumph, and the lesson would stay with her for a lifetime. The night was far from over, but the first major victory had been won, and she had proven, both to herself and to the world, that talent, dedication, and authenticity could overcome fear, expectation, and even the power of wealth. The applause continued as the waitress slowly stood from the piano bench, her hands brushing lightly over the polished surface as if to say goodbye to a trusted friend. She felt a mix of exhilaration and calm, a quiet confidence that had grown steadily with every note she played. The audience had been captivated, and the tension that had defined the evening's beginning had completely dissolved. What had started as a potential embarrassment had turned into a defining moment of her life, one she would remember for years. Guests approached her, some offering congratulations, others extending hands in acknowledgement of her talent. Their words were sincere, filled with a sense of wonder that could not be faked. People who had arrived expecting superficial entertainment were now genuinely inspired. They wanted to know how long she had been playing, what motivated her, and how she had developed such a skill that seemed to bridge technical mastery and emotional depth so effortlessly. Each question and compliment added to her sense of accomplishment, reinforcing that the courage to perform had transformed the entire evening. The millionaire remained near the back of the room, his expression unreadable. He had anticipated laughter, awkward glances, and discomfort from both the audience and the waitress. Instead, he had witnessed admiration, respect, and the undeniable appeal of genuine talent. His plan to assert dominance had been reversed, and he was forced to recognize that influence and wealth alone could not dictate admiration or control outcomes when someone's authenticity and skill came to the forefront. The waitress felt a warm glow of empowerment as she interacted with the guests. Their appreciation was not for her appearance, her role as a server, or her place in society. It was for her skill, her dedication, and her courage to embrace an unexpected challenge. Every handshake, every compliment, every smile reinforced her belief that effort and authenticity mattered more than circumstance. The evening had been transformed by her ability to rise above fear and expectation, and she could see that impact reflected in every face around her. The millionaire, trying to regain composure, clapped politely, though the room's attention had already shifted irreversibly. His presence was no longer commanding. He was simply another observer in a space that had been dominated by her talent. He realized that the admiration she had inspired could not be redirected or diminished by wealth or influence. The audience had chosen her as the focal point, and there was nothing he could do to change that. The waitress's mind replayed the journey of the evening so far. She thought of the initial fear, the uncertain steps toward the piano, and the hesitation that had nearly held her back. But she had embraced the challenge, allowed her passion to guide her, and the results had been transformative. The room had witnessed not only her talent but also the courage it took to perform under pressure. She had proven to herself and everyone present that fear could be transformed into strength, and that genuine talent demanded recognition regardless of social status. Guests lingered, some still seated, others standing and whispering excitedly among themselves. They spoke of her performance, of the emotional depth and technical skill displayed, and of the surprise of witnessing such talent from someone who had initially seemed ordinary. The young waitress had become the center of attention not through spectacle or wealth, but through her artistry. The experience had turned a moment of potential humiliation into a showcase of brilliance, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The atmosphere was electric, charged with admiration and curiosity. People who had arrived indifferent or skeptical now sought her out, wanting to engage and learn more. Their interest was genuine, driven by an appreciation for her skill and the unexpected power of her presence. She interacted graciously, answering questions, smiling, and sharing small stories about her connection to music without revealing too much. Her humility, combined with her confidence, made her all the more captivating. Even the staff, who had been quietly observing, could not help but admire her poise and talent. They exchanged knowing glances, impressed by the way she had turned an intimidating situation into a triumph. Her performance had elevated her from the background of the event to a position of respect and admiration, demonstrating that skill and courage could outshine status and wealth. The millionaire, though maintaining a polite demeanor, was visibly affected by the shift in dynamics. He had expected to dominate the evening, to assert control, and perhaps even amuse himself at the expense of another. Instead, he found himself witnessing admiration directed entirely elsewhere, admiration earned through effort, talent, and authenticity. The realization that his influence could not dictate outcomes in every scenario was subtle but unmistakable. As the evening progressed, the waitress felt a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that went beyond recognition. The music she had shared, the courage she had displayed, and the impact on the audience created a profound sense of accomplishment. She had transformed fear into strength, challenge into opportunity, and an attempt at embarrassment into a celebration of skill. Every note she had played had contributed to this moment, and every reaction from the guests reinforced the significance of her achievement. Guests continued to approach her, offering warm congratulations and sincere admiration. Some spoke of how moved they had been, others expressed curiosity about her journey and training. The attention was positive and empowering, reinforcing the lesson that talent and authenticity were more influential than appearances or social position. She had become an unexpected star, not through ambition, but through embracing her passion and allowing it to shine when the moment demanded it. The millionaire, observing the crowd's reactions, could not ignore the admiration and respect directed toward her. He had underestimated the young waitress, assuming she would falter under pressure, and now faced the undeniable truth that skill and courage commanded attention in ways he could not control. The evening, intended to demonstrate his influence, had become a testament to someone else's talent and resilience, a reality that was both humbling and instructive. The waitress, now more confident than before, reflected on the journey of the evening. The initial fear, the hesitant steps, the first tentative notes, all of it had led to this moment of recognition and empowerment. She realized that embracing challenges, rather than avoiding them, could reveal strengths previously hidden. The experience had not only transformed the evening but also reshaped her own perception of what was possible when courage met preparation. As she prepared to continue engaging with the audience, she noticed the genuine interest and curiosity in their eyes. People were inspired not only by her performance but also by the grace and confidence with which she had handled an unexpected situation. The room, once a space dominated by wealth and status, had become a platform for authenticity, skill, and human connection. Her music had created an emotional resonance that transcended superficial expectations, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The millionaire, recognizing the shift, could only observe. He had intended to orchestrate a moment of discomfort, yet found himself witnessing admiration, respect, and inspiration directed entirely elsewhere. The room had chosen its focal point through merit, not privilege, and he could not alter that reality. The experience served as a reminder that genuine skill and courage often outshine attempts at control, and that authenticity holds a power all its own. The waitress continued to engage with guests, sharing insights and responding to their admiration with humility and warmth. Her presence, once quiet and understated, now carried confidence and poise. She had transformed a potentially humiliating situation into an opportunity for recognition and connection, demonstrating that resilience, talent, and authenticity could overcome fear and expectation. The atmosphere remained vibrant, filled with curiosity, admiration, and positive energy. Guests reflected on the performance, discussing the depth and skill displayed, and acknowledging the courage it took to perform under pressure. The young waitress had not only captured their attention but also their respect, creating a memorable and meaningful experience that would resonate long after the evening ended. The millionaire, observing the impact of her performance, could not help but acknowledge the lesson implicit in the evening's events. Power and wealth could influence many aspects of life, but they could not manufacture talent, courage, or authenticity. The young woman had turned a potential moment of embarrassment into a triumph, demonstrating that determination and skill could command admiration far beyond what status alone could achieve. For the waitress, the evening had become a turning point. The recognition she received, the confidence she gained, and the affirmation of her abilities provided a profound sense of accomplishment. She had embraced a challenge, faced her fears, and shared her passion in a way that inspired and captivated those around her. The experience reinforced her belief in herself and in the value of pursuing one's talents, regardless of circumstance or expectation. As the evening moved forward, the atmosphere remained charged with admiration and respect. Guests continued to acknowledge her talent, express their curiosity, and offer words of encouragement. The room, once a stage for potential humiliation, had been transformed into a celebration of skill, courage, and authenticity. The young waitress had claimed her moment, and in doing so, had left an indelible impression on everyone present. The room had completely transformed from the beginning of the evening. Where tension and expectation had once ruled, admiration and warmth now filled the air. The young waitress, who had arrived unnoticed and ready to serve, had become the center of attention through her talent, determination, and poise. Every face in the room reflected genuine appreciation, and the applause that had begun earlier continued to ripple through the grand hall. She felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition. It was a quiet victory that affirmed her abilities and courage. Guests continued to approach her with smiles, handshakes, and words of admiration. Some asked about her musical journey, intrigued by the depth and skill displayed in her performance. Others complimented her poise, the way she had transformed nervous energy into expressive artistry. Each interaction strengthened her confidence, reminding her that the challenge she had faced was not only met but surpassed. The respect she received was earned, not given, and that made it even more meaningful. The millionaire, standing near the back, observed the scene with an unmistakable sense of astonishment. He had come into the evening expecting to command the room, to showcase his power and wealth, and to amuse himself at the expense of another. Instead, he found that his influence could not overshadow talent, authenticity, and courage. The young woman he had intended to embarrass had captivated everyone with her music, and in that moment, the balance of power had shifted subtly but undeniably. The waitress, sensing the lingering attention, allowed herself to smile with quiet pride. She had faced a challenge she had not anticipated, and she had done so with grace. Every note she had played, every chord, and every melody had been a declaration of her skill and her determination. She had turned a moment of potential humiliation into an opportunity to shine, and the impact of her performance was visible in every expression and reaction around the room. As she moved through the crowd, she noticed that people were genuinely inspired. Conversations that had been casual or superficial now centered on admiration, curiosity, and appreciation for the performance. Guests discussed the emotion and precision in her playing, the courage it took to perform under pressure, and the beauty of music as a universal language that could move hearts regardless of social status or background. Her presence had created an authentic connection with everyone present. The millionaire, still observing, recognized that he had underestimated her. He had assumed that a young waitress could be intimidated by a room full of wealthy and influential people, that she could be easily humiliated. The reality was starkly different. Her talent and composure had captured the audience, and the admiration she received could not be manufactured or controlled by wealth. He realized that influence had its limits and that true respect is earned through skill, courage, and authenticity. The waitress found herself approached by several guests who wanted to learn more about her background, her dedication to music, and her experiences leading up to this unexpected performance. She spoke humbly, sharing glimpses of her journey without boasting, allowing her sincerity to shine through. People listened attentively, clearly captivated not only by her performance but by the story of perseverance and dedication behind it. In that moment, she realized the true impact of embracing a challenge and sharing her talent authentically. Her thoughts briefly returned to the beginning of the evening, to the initial fear and hesitation that had almost held her back. The memory of the anxious steps toward the piano, the uncertainty of whether she could succeed under scrutiny, was now a testament to her growth. She had faced doubt, embraced courage, and demonstrated that authenticity and skill could overcome fear and expectation. The journey had transformed her, and the room reflected that transformation back to her through admiration and applause. The atmosphere of the mansion had shifted entirely. Where once the party had been defined by wealth, status, and superficial entertainment, it was now marked by respect, human connection, and appreciation for genuine talent. The young waitress had turned an ordinary evening into a memorable and inspiring experience for everyone present. The chandeliers, polished floors, and elegant surroundings were now the backdrop to a story of courage, skill, and unexpected triumph. Even the staff, who had been quietly observing from the edges of the room, could not help but admire her. They exchanged glances and subtle smiles, impressed by the way she had handled the situation with grace and confidence. Her performance had elevated her in the eyes of everyone present, demonstrating that preparation, authenticity, and courage could command attention and respect, even in environments dominated by wealth and status. The millionaire, while attempting to maintain a composed demeanor, could not mask the acknowledgement of her talent. He had intended to orchestrate a situation that highlighted his control and influence, yet he had inadvertently created a stage for her success. The audience had chosen their focus, and she had risen to meet it, earning admiration that no amount of wealth or authority could command. In witnessing this, he understood, however subtly, that true power often lies in skill, courage, and authenticity rather than status alone. As the evening drew on, the waitress found herself surrounded by genuine interest and encouragement. Guests shared their own experiences with music, stories of inspiration, and thoughts about courage and overcoming fear. The conversation flowed naturally, and she felt included not just as a performer, but as a valued participant in a shared human experience. The evening had become more than an event. It had evolved into a celebration of talent, courage, and human connection. Reflecting on the night, she realized that the experience had taught her more than she could have anticipated. The challenge she had faced, the fear she had felt, and the unexpected spotlight had all become catalysts for growth and self-discovery. She had demonstrated that embracing opportunity, even when it comes unexpectedly and under pressure, can reveal strengths and capabilities that might otherwise remain hidden. Her talent, combined with her courage and authenticity, had created a moment that transcended expectation and left a lasting impression. Guests continued to acknowledge her skill and composure, some expressing surprise that someone who appeared so ordinary could display such extraordinary talent. Their admiration was genuine, and it reinforced the lesson that assumptions based on appearances can be misleading. Talent and dedication can emerge from unexpected places, and recognition often follows courage and authenticity rather than status or presentation. The young waitress, feeling both proud and humbled, allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She had turned a potentially humiliating situation into a transformative experience. Her music had captured hearts, inspired admiration, and created a lasting memory for everyone present. The recognition she received was not superficial or fleeting. It was grounded in genuine appreciation for skill, courage, and the willingness to embrace a challenge. The millionaire, observing the scene, could no longer assert control over the audience's attention. The dynamic of the evening had shifted irreversibly, and the respect that had once seemed reserved for wealth and status was now directed toward her. His initial plan to dominate had been subverted, replaced by a celebration of talent, perseverance, and authenticity that he could not manipulate or diminish. The realization, subtle though it was, marked a turning point in the evening's narrative. As the night continued, the atmosphere remained vibrant with admiration and genuine connection. Guests engaged with her respectfully and enthusiastically, asking questions, offering praise, and sharing personal stories. The evening had become an interactive experience, highlighting the importance of talent, courage, and authenticity over social hierarchy or superficial expectation. Her performance had created an environment in which appreciation and inspiration thrived naturally. For the waitress, the night was a lesson in the power of self-belief and perseverance. She had faced a situation she could not have anticipated, navigated it with courage, and turned it into an opportunity to demonstrate her skill and resilience. The applause, compliments, and admiration she received were affirmations of her abilities and her capacity to rise to unexpected challenges. The experience had not only changed the evening, but had also strengthened her confidence and self-perception. As she reflected, she realized that her performance had created a ripple effect, inspiring those around her to recognize the value of courage, preparation, and authenticity. The room, once defined by status and expectation, had become a space where talent and determination were celebrated. Her ability to embrace a challenge and shine in an unfamiliar and intimidating environment had transformed the perception of everyone present. The evening, initially marked by tension and potential embarrassment, ended on a note of genuine admiration and respect. The young waitress, who had begun the night as a quiet observer, had become a central figure, celebrated for her skill, courage, and poise. Her music had created a lasting impact, leaving an impression on the guests and demonstrating that talent and authenticity hold power beyond appearances, wealth, or status. The millionaire, watching the admiration directed at her, could only acknowledge the reality of the situation. His attempt to orchestrate a moment of humiliation had inadvertently showcased her talent and resilience. The audience had chosen their focal point based on merit, not influence, and the young woman had risen to meet that attention with grace and skill. In doing so, she had transformed the evening into an unforgettable experience, proving that courage and authenticity can triumph over expectation and social hierarchy. The young waitress's heart swelled with a quiet pride and a sense of accomplishment.